listeners, welcome back to another episode of Let's Think Green, an environmental podcast where we give you the tools and knowledge to create positive change in the environment. Is there an environmental issue in your community that you want to solve? Do you feel lost when you think about how you could address it? Well, this episode is for you because today we'll be thinking and talking about creating an environmental campaign. Stay tuned! Before we get into the episode, I want to give credit where credit is due. We were looking for some environmental books at the library and Pragya found one, How to Give Up Plastic, A Guide to Changing the World One Plastic Bottle at a Time by McCallum. He, in his book, explained the process of creating an environmental campaign in such great detail, and we all love the idea so much that we wanted to share it with you. So all credit goes to him. If it weren't for his book, we wouldn't be able to give this episode to you. Let's get on with the episode. An environmental campaign is a way to address a social problem that you see and a way to get the community and media involved in order to convince the business or organization that you're targeting to change their ways. It may seem intimidating at first to start a campaign and have the label of activist, but rest assured, after listening to this episode, you will feel completely at ease because I will be outlining the exact steps that you should take and giving you tons of tips along the way, so you'll never feel lost. Let's get right into it, and the first step of creating an environmental campaign is to choose a problem. This one might seem obvious because if you want to start an environmental campaign, you probably already have a problem in mind, but it's good to sit down and think about what the problem truly is and what you want the organization or business that you're targeting to change. An example would be a lot of local restaurants in my community use styrofoam takeout containers. The second step would be to do some research on the issue you're targeting. You want to understand exactly what is the environmental problem, what are the consequences of continuing that behavior, why that behavior should be changed, and what are alternatives to the existing behavior. It's really important that you have a thorough understanding of the problem that you're addressing so you're able to establish your credibility and convince community members, business organizations, council members, and people on social media that you know what you're talking about and that your campaign deserves to be heard. For me, if I were to create a campaign about all the styrofoam takeout containers, I would do research on why styrofoam is bad for the environment, what are the consequences of continuing to use styrofoam, and I would also research what are some alternatives to styrofoam. I could also research plastic pollution in general to place my problem in a larger context. The third step is to write a letter to the business. You may notice that I said letter and not email. And that is because a letter is much more personal than an email. You want your letter to be short, concise, and clear, but you also want it to be personal and authentic so the recipient truly listens to what you're saying. Now, to the actual body of the letter. You want to explain to the business or organization that you're targeting what your campaign is all about, why your campaign matters, how your business is relevant to the campaign, what the business is doing that they should change, how the business can change their behavior, and what the business should change their behavior to. For me, if I were using the styrofoam example, that would be explaining about plastic pollution and how styrofoam is really bad for the environment because of excessive waste and the fact that it's not recyclable. I could explain that the business is using styrofoam, thus contributing to plastic pollution, and that plastic pollution has been contaminating countless ecosystems on our Earth. I could talk about how I want the business to switch to using recyclable takeout containers or reusable or cardboard takeout containers. And if you want to be extra convincing, you could even talk about the financial side of it, how that might be, that's a big might, I haven't done research on this, how that may be more economically friendly too, if you really want to get them on your side. Aside from talking about all the things I just mentioned, you also want to talk about your relationship to the business. Have you been eating there a long time? Do you love shopping there? Maybe you've worked there, or you have family members who work there, or you really agree with the business's value. It's important to include that personal aspect too, so that you really send the message to the business that your campaign is important to you and that it's a personal issue for you. You want to end your letter with a call to action, and that should be a meeting. You want to meet with the business face to face. You want to address the letter to the highest person in the business. This will send the message that your campaign is very important and that the person at the highest rung of the business deserves to know about it, needs to know about it, and that the problem is that important. The fourth step is to set up a meeting. You want to meet with the business or organization in person. This is basically a chance to reiterate what your letter said and give the organization or business the opportunity to ask you questions, have a discussion. And this is an opportunity for you to understand why the business has been doing things the way they have. Your ultimate goal, as McCallum puts it, is to walk out of the door with a new ally. You may not end the meeting where you want to, with the business agreeing with what you're saying and changing their ways, but as long as you have moved in a positive direction, you are good. It may take a few meetings to end up where you want to be, and that's perfectly fine. I have a special announcement. We finally got our podcast on Spotify. So for all of you who love using Spotify, just type in Let's Think Green Podcast in the search bar, scroll down to the podcast section, and it should be right there. The fifth step is to get the media involved by creating a press release. Getting the media involved in anything can seem a little intimidating because they are the media. But don't worry, it's not. I want to let you know that local newspapers want to hear about what people in their community is doing. I mentioned press release. For those of you who don't know, a press release is a way to tell a newspaper organization or journalist of a specific story. The first step of creating a press release is having an attention-grabbing headline. McCallum provides a few examples in his book, which I'll read out loud to you. Locals call on council to change its ways and help end ocean plastics. Another headline is local campaign reveals council throws away 100,000 coffee cups per year. Those headlines grab your attention. They let you know there's a problem and what that problem is and what needs to be changed. But they're also neutral. They're not overly negative, bashing one side versus another, which is how you want it to be. In your press release, these are the things you want to include. 5 to 7 bullet points providing stats that provide an overview of the problem and your campaign. You also want to have a paragraph or two explaining the 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, and why. The who is the company involved and the campaigners involved. The what is happening, what is the problem, and what is the campaign going to do about it. The when is when did the campaign start? The why is your campaign important? Why is it relevant? Why should people in the community care about your campaign and about this issue? Again, you want to write in clear, concise language and avoid complicated jargon. At the end of the press release, don't forget to provide your contact information so people can get in touch with you. Send your press release to radio, local news, and local newspapers. This might seem intimidating, but remember, the worst that can happen is they'll ignore it. And the best that can happen is they will actually follow up on what you said. So take the risk. Don't let fear hold you back. If you haven't heard back about your press release after a week or so, send a tweet to the news organization to let them know that you have sent them a press release. If you've been consistently reaching out to the business, you've sent them a letter, tweets, you've called in, and they're just not willing to meet with you or they haven't been able to, then start a petition. Your petition should be about what you want the business to change. So going back to my example, if I want the business to start using recyclable takeout containers, then that's what my petition would be about. Aim for about 200 signatures. To collect signatures, you can obviously do it online through change.org or some other website like that. And I would suggest going to places where you know community members hang out, whether that's parks, coffee shops, or city council meetings. Once you've collected about 200 signatures, hand off the petition to the business. This will send the business that you're targeting the message that this campaign is not only important to you, it's important to a lot of members in the community. And it will also place pressure on the business to act and start off by meeting with you. In the end, campaigning is not a science. there is an art to learning how to do it. And the only way to learn is by actually doing it. Don't get discouraged if your campaign doesn't take off on the first day. All good things take time, and if your message is really important, then it will get heard, it will have a voice. The final piece of advice is start small. Start with a small local business before going on after the big giant. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. If you learned something new today, then don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or YouTube. That really helps other people like you find our podcast and learn how to become environmentally sustainable. If you want to learn more about campaigning and creating an environmental campaign with lots more examples, then be sure to check out Will McCallum's book, How to Give Up Plastic. He has tons of examples. It's a great read. The entire book is a great read, just learning about how to give up plastic in general. So I hope you all will check that out. Have a great week, everyone.